Well, the best way to characterize the Ukrainian military today is to note this. Everybody, I think, has seen the videos of the Ukrainian police running around chasing guys down and getting them into vehicles for mobilization. That tells you the enthusiasm that exists. Here's the other thing. You know, the guys that are chasing them, they're cowards. They spent $20,000 to $30,000 to buy the right to stay off the front line to hunt these guys down. This is pathetic. There is no will to fight in the Ukrainian military.
All right. I want to run a clip from Stefano Sannino. Mr. Sannino was a high-ranking official of the European Union. He's an Italian diplomat. Forgive me, I don't know exactly which committee he's on or which position he holds, but it's one of the positions in the EU that is full-time. He's fluent in English, so you're going to hear it in what we call in New Jersey broken English, but you can understand what he says. And I want your thoughts on what Commissioner Sannino says about the nature of the battle going on.
Putin has moved from a concept of special operation to a concept now of a war against NATO and the West. So we are not speaking anymore about special operation to free up a country from a Nazi leadership. Now we are speaking about a war with NATO and with the West. Different story.
Different story. Is he recognizing a realization that you and Colonel McGregor and others have been warning about, that there are forces in the West that want this to be Russia's war with the West?
Well, I think what he's recognizing is that Russia recognizes it as a war with the West, and Russia is organizing itself and preparing for just that. The Russian army that's fighting right now in Ukraine is not the Russian army that started this conflict. This is an army that has been built from scratch, rebuilt from scratch to fight NATO. It's not, when they talk about closing with the Ukrainians, they're not thinking about these are Ukrainians. They're saying this is NATO. This is the collective West, and they're prepared to take this to whatever level the West wants to take it. But this is a Russian army that is trained, equipped, motivated, ready to win, to fight a NATO threat, not a Ukrainian threat.
And how long is NATO and the West prepared to keep putting arms into Ukraine when inwardly they know that it's futile?
Well, I think we've answered that question because Kirby won't be honest. The point is, we know Ukraine has lost. We know it. The CIA director, General Mark Milley, have all briefed the Ukrainians on what the Russians are getting ready to do. And the Ukrainians know they don't have sufficient resources to match what the Russians are getting ready to do. This war will be over, as Zelensky said, by August.
All right. I don't know to whom Admiral Kirby speaks. And by the way, I've met him many times when I was at Fox. He's a competent, charming guy, but right now he's got a mouth of political voice. I want you to listen to his answer to a question about not how long the U.S. is going to be there, but how long this is going to go on.
I think we need to prepare ourselves that to continue to have to continue to support Ukraine for quite some time. I can't be perfectly predictive.
Does he know what he's talking about? Quite some time, or this is not going to last quite some time?
No, first of all, politically speaking, we have to remain committed to supporting Ukraine. And so we know our own military leadership has said that Ukraine will not be able to evict Russia from Ukraine this year. They never will be able to, but we can't say that. So we say it's going to be a long fight. But the fact is, we're unwilling to give Ukraine the equipment they need to win the war in the time frame available, which means we know this war will be over come August, September, October of this year.
Now listen to Admiral Kirby, who sounds as if, this will really get your blood pressure, Scott, who sounds as if Ukraine is a member of NATO. Take a listen to this.
President Biden has said since the very beginning of this conflict that we take our Article 5 commitments to NATO seriously. Article 5, of course, is the notion that an attack on one is an attack on all. And we take that seriously. In fact, we take it so seriously that President Biden ordered an additional 20,000 American troops alone onto the European continent, and they still are there. Now, we'll be rotating them in and out, but the net number of 100,000 American troops on the European continent has stayed the same and will stay the same for the foreseeable future.
Boy, this is a lot to unpack. First, what the hell is he talking about, Article 5? Article 5 is irrelevant because Ukraine is not a member of NATO. There's no legal or treaty obligation whatsoever on the part of any country to come to the defense of NATO. And secondly, why is he saying how many American troops are in 100,000 more than usual, less than usual, or is it sending more bodies there? Start with your Admiral Kirby. In my view, just a reference to Article 5 of the NATO Treaty.
Well, first of all, the reference to Article 5, of course, has nothing to do with Ukraine. It has everything to do with the fears that have been promulgated by Poland and the Baltic nations about Russian aggression, and the notion that because Russia went into Ukraine, Russia intends to go into Poland and the Baltics. And this is why we've sent the troops into Europe, to beef up the presence in the eastern areas, so that we can tell our NATO allies that if Russia were to make this incursion, we would be there for them under Article 5.
100,000 troops in Europe, 40,000 in Romania. I guess the other 60,000 are at Ramstein. I don't know. What do these numbers tell you? Is it what we traditionally, typically have kept there in the post-Cold War era? Or is old Joe sending more troops there in dribs and drabs so that when he decides we have to go to war, he has the bodies with which to do it?
Well, let's be clear. During the Cold War, in order to fight a Soviet military presence of 400 to 500,000 troops in East Germany, we had 300,000 troops permanently stationed in West Germany, and we were prepared to immediately rotate 250,000 more using an exercise called Reforger. Prior to this conflict, we had around 60,000 troops in Europe. No tanks, by the way. They were all striker units, artillery units, etc. Now we've beefed it up to 100,000. This is through a rotation of heavy armored brigades and other brigades, for instance, like the 101st Airborne Division that's in Romania right now. The total number of troops is 100,000. I told you to fight 500,000 Russians, we needed to have over 550,000. This 100,000 is a joke, literally a joke. It's zero combat capability. You try to project 100,000 Americans into Ukraine against not just the 700,000 Russians that they have now, but Russia just said they're expanding their military to 1.5 million. I mean, yay, good job, NATO. Because of what we did in Ukraine, Russia's literally building up a stronger army, a more capable army than they had prior to this conflict. This is purely psychological. It has nothing to do with reality.
I was going to ask you if Putin is depleting the strength of his army, but you've already put your finger on that pulse, and your argument is that no, he's not depleting it. He's making it bigger and stronger.
Yeah, the fact is Russia's taking casualties. Let's not pretend it hasn't. But what Russia has done is transition from a peacetime military, which it was when it went in on the special military operation, to this new military that is full of combat veterans who know how to fight. Russia has fixed its mobilization problems. Russia has fixed its defense industry problems. You know, we promise tanks that we can't build, and it's going to take us months to get our defense industry to build a handful of tanks. Russia's building between 20 and 40 T-90 modern battle tanks every month. Their defense industry is cranking.
In a land war to tanks. I always thought that, trying to remember my days from basic training, the infantry is the queen of battle. Do you remember that line? What is the significance of tanks?
Well, today tanks have actually been diminished because the proliferation of guided anti-tank missiles amongst infantry means that if a tank goes out and tries to bum rush a unit that's dug in, you're going to lose your tanks. The tanks have to operate as part of a combined arms team with sufficient artillery support, dismounted and mounted infantry, and then the tank has some utility. But the tank has to keep moving, and the tank has to be supported. Russia is trained to do this. We're trained to do this. You know who's not trained to do it with this new equipment they're getting in? The Ukrainians. We are literally feeding them suicide pills every time we give them this equipment.
One of the points you make in your recent article that starts out about Rammstein, and it's a brilliant article, by the way, Scott, and it brings us down to the ground in Ukraine, is how, and I can't use the adjective because it's a military adjective, it's a 4-letter word turned into a gerund, how blankety blank miserable the Abrams and Bradley tanks are, how they break down all the time, how nearly impossible it is to keep them operating for Americans that have been trained for years on maintaining these things. Is this right?
No, it's 100% right. Look, in the best of conditions, an Abrams tank for every 1 hour of operation in the field needs 3 hours of maintenance.
Oh.
That's the best condition. Now we put in combat conditions where you're not getting the proper, continuous maintenance. Things get breaking down. You're probably looking at 5 to 6 hours of maintenance for every 1 hour of combat time. This requires full-time, highly trained maintenance crews that the Ukrainians don't have. So the Ukrainians now, when a tank breaks, are going to have to take that tank and remove it out of Ukraine back to Poland or Germany to be repaired. This is an impossibly complicated logistical support mechanism. It's doomed to fail.
Before I let you go, what is the name of your friend who's gotten as much sound in this as you have?
That is Maverick, and I apologize for him. I scheduled, the reason why I picked the 3 o'clock timetable for you is that this was supposed to be a window where nobody was coming in and out of my house. But in the middle of the interview, somebody came in the house and the dog has just gone bonkers. So I apologize for that. I apologize
when Chris is here, he doesn't bark, but he nips at my hands and feet. I'm not sure which is worse. Scott, no matter what we're talking about, I know that our audience genuinely appreciates you, and you know how much I do. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for tolerating Maverick.
Oh, of course. Give Maverick our best. Judge Napolitano.
Okay.
Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.